One question that many of us on the right ask is how is it that leftists act so thoroughly against their own real or perceived self-interest? And how do they act entirely out of a misplaced sense of altruism against their own interests? And I think that we've kind of been missing the point a bit here. It's not that they're deliberately acting against their own interests. Well, some are. But I think with many, it's a very different type of psychology at work here. What I believe is that many of them do think honestly that they are acting in their own self-interest by advocating as open borders as possible. Like when Merkel says we still have to keep bringing in refugees even after all these terror attacks. And a lot of her leftist constituents agree with her. Now, how do they see this as their self-interest? It's very simple. They have an us versus them mentality that is firmly rooted in the events of World War II. They basically see the us as people who are essentially the quote unquote allies. They see them as the quote unquote Nazis. They believe that we are still fighting essentially a Cold War between the Allies and the Nazis. Only now it's not a war of nations, but a civil war, an ideological war. And they honestly believe that if we don't keep letting in as many immigrants as possible, the alternative is Nazism. They believe that today it might be that we're restricting Muslim immigrants. Tomorrow it might be that we're sterilizing people with brown eyes. And most white people, let's face it, as I've said many times, most white people are not 6'6", blonde-haired, blue-eyed Ubermenschen like in National Socialist propaganda posters. The average white person does not look like that. The average white person probably has at least one physical or mental illness or defect of some kind. The average white person does not have an IQ of 130. Realistically, most of us probably do have a bit to be afraid of from the idea of a hardline eugenics regime. So that's how they see it. Like they honestly believe that as shitty as Muslims and blacks and all these people are, the alternative is Nazism, and probably a more extreme form of Nazism. They believe in a slippery slope there. Like they don't believe in a slippery slope with their own ideology, but they believe that if we were to start restricting immigration, then it would not be long before brown-eyed people are on the chopping block next. And this perspective is ludicrous, of course, because it assumes, it has to be one extreme or the other. It assumes that there's no middle ground. And this is ridiculous, of course. It's a ridiculous perspective. In any political issue, there's moderates and there's extremists, and it is possible to toe a centrist line on a political issue, like centrist as in between both extremes. So the idea that we have to accept unlimited immigration, or else the alternative is that anyone who's not 6'6", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, with a high IQ and no mental or physical disabilities and 100.00% Northwestern European DNA. Like it's not one or the other, okay? And I get that there are actually people who want that. I get it. I talk to people like that in the comments sections of my own videos. I realize that people like that do exist. But guess what? These people are fucking LARPers, okay? They're LARPers. They're not ever going to get what they want because what they want is fucking ludicrous. But there's a very good chance that ISIS will get what they want. And leftists love to talk about how peaceful the Western world has been since World War II. Of course, ignoring, Vietnam, Iraq, because those weren't in the Western world. And that's another reason why it's actually not altruism but self-interest. Because when they talk about how peaceful the world is today, they're talking about how peaceful the Western world is today. These leftists don't actually give a fuck about the lives of Vietnamese or Iraqis, but they do give a fuck about the fact that we have not seen a major internal war in the Western world since World War II. Okay? So it is self-interest. They like the fact that we haven't seen war in a long time. They like the fact that we've had an unparalleled period of peace and prosperity. But you know what? That period is coming to an end. Look at what's happening in Europe right now with all these terror attacks. This is becoming the new normal. Yeah, okay, it was a nice ride while it lasted, I guess. It was nice to have fucking Hollywood movies and fucking dance parties and all that other shit we had. But guess what? This shit is coming to an end. It's not gonna last forever. We could very much be seeing the twilight years of the post World War II era. All right? And if we want to save ourselves, we have to acknowledge that we've gone too gosh damn fucking far in the opposite direction. It's not just a choice between sterilizing or euthanizing anyone who isn't 6'6", blonde, high IQ, blue eyes, no mental defects, versus letting in literally every terrorist fuck in the world into our countries. Like they think it is. They see things in this binary where and that's why they keep calling Trump Hitler. They call any politician who dares to suggest even the slightest restrictions on immigration, they call him Hitler. And I realize that what they fear is far beyond what Hitler did, but that they see it as a slippery slope. They don't believe in a slippery slope when it comes to their own policies, but they do believe in a slippery slope when it comes to the policies of the right. So, is it really altruism that motivates leftists? I think that's giving them too much credit. I don't think they're that unselfish people. I know leftists in my own personal life. They're not good people. They're not unselfish people. Okay? They have selfish motivations like everyone else. They like their fucking Netflix and they like their fucking, sushi buffets. They're not donating all their money to charity. They're spending their money on fucking Netflix and fucking poutine and other fucking food at restaurants and clothing, expensive clothing. These people are not selfless Joan of Arc, fucking Mother Teresa. That's not the kind of people these leftists are. They are, in fact, motivated by self-interest to a large extent, and their self-interest is they see themselves as the allies continuing to fight the Cold War against Nazism, a Cold War that in their minds has existed since the end of World War II. And now with the rise of Trump and nationalist parties, they believe this Cold War is becoming a hot war again. And I think that's why in media we're seeing a lot of kind of programming that is focusing on this idea that the Cold War is becoming a hot war against Nazism again. That was basically the plot of The Force Awakens, the new Star Wars movie. That's also the undertones in the new Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. We're seeing this kind of, I guess you call it, what's the term, predictive programming, like stories in mass media that are meant to reflect the current political climate. And this is an undercurrent theme that I'm seeing more and more in major media lately. The idea that, the chickens are coming home to roost, the long dormant conflict that we've been fighting in a subtle way since the end of World War II is now rearing its ugly head again. So that's, I think, really a big part of their motivation. It's not just altruism. It's this idea that they are fighting to protect this amazing post-World War II peaceful world that they've created for themselves. This world with no more war. That's really, I think, what it's about. Not only no more war, but also unparalleled material prosperity. So, I mean, I don't know. There is an element of foolish altruism in there, but I think there's more than that. I think it's genuinely that they think that if we restrict immigration, it's going to lead to Nazism. And they may not like all these immigrants. They might realize that the crime, the degradation of neighborhoods is a problem. And they might also realize that we can't make it better. But they view the alternative as much scarier. So, what's it going to take to convince them? I think these terrorist attacks that have happened in the past month, if this sort of shit actually becomes the new norm in Europe, I would say give it a couple years, maybe 3 years of nonstop terror attacks on a regular basis, and by that point, they might be willing to reconsider if this obsession with stopping Nazism from rearing its ugly head with this insane, dualistic, absolutist binary is worth it. ask themselves, is their obsessive paranoia about Nazism worth the daily terrorist attacks? And they will soon start to understand this peaceful, prosperous world that they've carved out for themselves after the end of World War II is no longer so peaceful, and it very well may soon no longer be so prosperous. So, if you want to ask what the self interest of white leftists is, there you go, right there.